Honestly, I am an open book here to talk about whatever direction we want to go. I know I get a varied amount of questions from students when it comes into it, particularly after they've heard about my burnout experience. If you just Google my name, you'll see a whole bunch of shit about what I went through as far as in residency, after residency, and life beyond. I've been super outspoken about my experience with burnout in order to help other people know that they're not alone in this. So, a little bit about my story then to dive in. And if there's little ears, you might want to cover them because I'm a hashtag potty mouth mom. 2014 was the worst fucking year of my life. I mean, that's bringing in med school, that's having a baby in my internship year of family medicine residency. Um, I was supposed to be at the peak of the mountain. Like I had done all the things. I was the first doctor in my family. I had scraped by. I had like figured it out. I had signed the big girl contract. I was done with residency. I had had our second child. And within weeks of starting my big girl attending job, I was miserable and empty. And I looked around and I was like, holy shit, this is the next 30 years of my life. This is what I gave up my 20s, my kids' first words and first steps, all those holidays, shit, probably a few years off of my life from my stress levels. This is what I've worked so hard for. And when people ask me like what to describe about like what was it? Was it the job or what was it? And at the time I wouldn't have even been able to tell you. My husband, when I came home one night and was like, I'm done. Like, I'm quitting. Like, I'm going to go work and be a bank teller or, I don't know, sack groceries at the local store. He was like, are they mean to you? Like, is somebody abusing you? Like, what is it exactly? And I didn't even have the words at that time to articulate what exactly was going on, but it just felt like my soul was fractured. Like I was broken because this thing that I had decided to do to go take care of and to heal people. And I'll be honest, I'm a little braggy. I do a really good job as well. I had no fulfillment in it. Like it was like, yeah, here you go. And you're cold and your medicines. And yeah, I got your mom hospitalized and she's alive because of me, but like whatever. And it just seemed like more and more burden, more frustration, anger, even just being angry at everything. And I was like, I must be crazy. I must be crazy. But I will not go get mental health support because if you do that, then that means you're weak and you can't hack it. Or I'll lose my license. And then how am I going to pay back $250,000 worth of loans after all this? How am I going to take care of my two little kids? How am I going to pay all my bills now that I've like done this thing and dedicated so much of my life to this? And now I don't want to have any part of it. But here is the light at the end of the tunnel that I do want to share with all this doom and gloom. It's a-okay now. I am so much better now. And you'll ask me, like, people will be like, well, what happened in there? A whole shit ton of life happened. But the first and biggest thing, and what I want to impart to you guys as students and as beginning your journey, do not lose who you are because of what you're going to do. Let me say that again. Do not lose who you are because you're becoming a doctor or you're becoming a specialist or you're becoming a whatever. Because when you become that thing, you will just be a shell. And let me tell you, life is not worth living when you're just a shell of a doctor or a shell of a neurosurgeon or a shell of an orthopedist or dermatologist. Life feels really fucking empty at that point. So, with that all being said, hindsight's always 2020. I was definitely burnt out in med school. I was already burned out when I started this journey. But here's the thing. You don't go into medicine if you're not a little bit of a perfectionist. You don't go into medicine and doing this caliber of work unless you're kind of a workaholic. And it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't drugs, it wasn't shopping or porn or gambling. Work was my drug. Work is how I proved that I was worthy and that I did a good job. And that's where all of my self-value came from. But guess what? Just like any drug, it will eventually eat you alive. And in a profession that almost idolizes work, I mean, it's like a freaking badge of honor when you can say you've done 36 hours of call, or you've spent 4 nights in the hospital out of the last 7, or that you've done 13 admissions over a shift. It's kind of a freaking badge of honor to be a workaholic, and it's not healthy. And I can say that I am not a victim of this. I am a survivor. And now I'm on the other side to share with you guys that it doesn't have to be this way. It's not you. So the Stanford model of professional fulfillment shows that when we're dealing with burnout, when we're dealing with professional fulfillment, so that's like your job making you feel fulfilled, there's 3 parts. So one part is personal resiliency. You are not in this room. You are not going into medicine unless you are resilient as fuck. So I push against all this like resiliency training. Yeah, I think we all need to have some emotional intelligence, and I think we need to have more of that in our life. But I do not like the word resiliency, so I'll just preface that first. But anyway, they categorize it as personal resiliency. The second part to fulfillment is the culture for which you're in. So the culture as in like big culture, like how an organization takes care of its people, what are its policies and procedures. And the third part of fulfillment is the operations and systems for which you work with on a day-to-day basis. So I want to take the conversation away from burnout as being a you problem and make sure that everyone understands that this is a global issue. This is not a Errin Weisman couldn't hack it and she's broken. It was that Errin Weisman was a square peg trying to be shoved in a round hole, and it just didn't work. Ladies, do we have any questions so far?
No, I think most people are just...
Everybody's just sitting back and they're like, what did she just say?
A lot of people are saying that they already see it kind of in their pre-med life. Like, I haven't slept in 2 days, or I studied for 30 hours, and it's kind of a competition of like who's suffering.
Oh, it's totally. It's like, whose dick's longer? Does it matter? No. Does it work? Yes. Then it's fine.
So we actually did get a question that was asking, is burnout something that you kind of foresaw going into medical school or not?
No.
And if so,
no, because I was like, that's just like what it was supposed to be. Like, we were all supposed to work hard. We were supposed to be tired. We're supposed to be like that. That's what I thought training was supposed to be. But then I thought, like, once you got done with it, it got better. But newsflash, it doesn't. At all. Maybe the money increases, but let me tell you, if money made people happy, I would not have a business as a life coach. They wouldn't need me. Because if you're rolling in dough and if that really makes you happy, then why would any of people who are in the healing arts, like, there would be no therapists. We would just throw money at things.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a lot of people that are just kind of sharing their own experiences. And a lot of people are asking just kind of like, how did you cope with it? So I guess we'll get more into that as the session goes on. But someone asked if being a DO added more stress and kind of like internal competition with your colleagues and a need to like prove yourself more, show that you are worthy to be there and things like that.
Is she present for you?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
sorry, my computer glitched out.
Okay.
Stupid technology. What I heard you say last was about the DO stuff.
Yes.
I would love to talk about being a DO.
Yeah,
because
so
I think
if that like stressed you out more or ever like contributed to that burnout.
So I think you have to look at being a DO. It was not a second string choice for me. I intentionally chose to be an osteopathic physician. And I know a lot of pre-med.
Well, let's talk a little bit about being a DO. So for me, it was never a second rate choice. And I know a lot of pre-meds go into thinking about when you're applying to medical school, like it's MD. And then if you didn't become an MD, then I guess you'll be a DO. And I want to caution you, like if that is your mindset, you need to examine it pretty damn hard because DOs are not second rate by any means. It's just a different way to go about to go about medicine. And also, honestly, for me, I was really attracted that there were healthcare professionals who were at the level of physician who were paying attention to the mind, body, spirit connection. And the one that was probably the greatest thing for me is when I was interviewing for med schools. And instead of the typical, like, look to your right, look to your left, like one of you is not going to make it even for an interview at an allopathic school. When I went to Kansas City, they were like, yeah, we want you to be here. And it just seemed like everyone around me was smiling and like generally liked their job. And I was like, this is amazing. This is where.
Oh, Dr. Weisman, I think your mic got muted.
You got me now?
Yes.
Gosh, there is some powers in the universe that does not want me to talk to you guys right now. What was the last thing you heard?
I even lost it in my head. You were saying that everyone was happy, and yeah, that's where we kind of ended.
Okay, so yeah, really saw a huge attitude difference between osteopathic training and allopathic training that I had been around. And honestly, it also came down to a personal connection with the DO. My family physician was a DO, and I saw how he interacted with people, and I saw how he gave people hugs and that he wasn't afraid to touch them, which if you don't know, like, that's part of being a physician. You can't be afraid to touch people, and that there is really healing power in touch. And when we've become so sterile and so hands off that we don't even want to confront the human spirits that are in front of us, I think there's something wrong with that. And so DO is not second rate. Actually, I feel like it was probably the absolute best and first rate choice for me. Now, was there a little bit of imposter syndrome when I went into residency and I was one of 2 DOs in my program and I looked around and everybody else had MD behind their name? Yeah, there were some thoughts of like, oh shit, like they probably know more than I do about X, Y, and Z. But what I quickly began to realize is that so much of your success in medicine is not always about the book smart and what you know, but is about communication. It's about the willingness to get down on somebody else's level and really connect with them and have a conversation. Because if you're quiet long enough, your patient will tell you what's wrong with them. And so, as you can tell, I am hardcore DO. So I would have everyone look at it not as a first rate, second rate choice, but instead, like, say, maybe you want something a little bit different. Am I just as prepared as my MD colleagues? Yes. And I would say more so in some ways. You know, I can use osteopathic manipulation both as a treatment, but also as an evaluation. I think that there was more attention towards wellness in my school, my medical school. Was there enough? No. But that's why I'm happy to say, you know, that I'm a guest speaker for my medical school, and I come back and I talk about these experiences and hope to be part of the change that happens within the osteopathic culture. I can't see the questions now. Did we have any more pop up?
Yes, so thank you for sharing that. Some other people are wondering, how can you differentiate between burnout and just kind of like working hard and being busy, and when do you admit to yourself that it's time to kind of step back?
Okay, say the first question again.
People are wondering, when do you know that it's burnout versus like working hard or just being busy?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer it. And I know the best way is just to like put it out there and say it. So you know the difference. Like, you know the difference when you have a rough day and you're like, okay, tomorrow's going to be better. Where burnout is the constant grind. And yeah, it may get like 1 or 2% better, but when it's like on the foreseeable future, like, this is what it is. There's a whole like formal, you know, diagnosis criteria for what burnout is. But what I want to tell you what it is if you are feeling either a large amount of emotions, or you're on the other side of the spectrum and you're starting to feel numbed out. If you are to the point that you're looking around and you're asking yourself, like, man, I wish that I would get hit by a truck, or that I had cancer, or that some huge life-changing event would happen to me, friend, you're a little bit burned out. More than a little bit, you're super burned out at that point. You know, and I think that's part of the thing with culturally in medical education and in pre-med education. Like, there's this fallacy of thought of like, oh, it's going to get better. Oh, it's going to get better. Oh, it's going to get better. And how many times do you have to say that until you get real with yourself and say, like, wow, the only way that this is going to get better is if I make some changes, instead of keep trying to hold your breath. Because that's what burnout really felt like to me, was that, like, I was struggling to tread water and to keep my head above the water. And eventually, just like any drowning victim, you're going to get tired and you're not going to be able to do it anymore. So that's how I would describe. And I think it's something that you have to come down to, because the other question I get too is like, Weisman, what's the difference between depression and burnout? And it's a super fine line. It's a gray area, definitely, because I think depression leads to burnout, and I think burnout leads to depression. And so it's really understanding yourself. And I think that's part of the journey that's really hard, is you have to be really in touch with yourself, because these changes will happen like a thief in the night, super quiet, super sneaky, and you don't really realize what's happened. It's kind of like that analogy of if you put a frog in a pan of water and like you slowly heat the water up. That's what burnout is, I think, is that slow heating up until you realize, like, oh my God, it's boiling, versus being like dropped into a boiling pot of water.
Yeah,
and then the second question.
I think a lot of people are just asking, I guess, how to prevent burnout, and like to not, that fine line of like keep going but not slack off. And I know a lot of us are just like scared of taking breaks because it feels like we're slacking off because of the like just the normalcy of go as pre-meds. Oh, you're muted again. Oh, did she leave?
I think she got kicked off.
I'm back, baby.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Hey, that is the $1 million question. How do we prevent burnout? How do we mitigate it? How do we make sure that as younger physicians that we don't perpetuate the culture of burnout? I think that is absolutely the huge question that's happening right now. And I'll be perfectly honest, I don't have the answer. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys. I would be sitting in my yacht in Tahiti, drinking whatever I wanted to at this point on my private jet before I go to Australia, right? And so what we can do is, instead of taking this huge issue and like floundering around in it, is bring it down to the microscopic level and understand, again, you have to have the awareness of yourself, of like what's normal and what's abnormal for me. What is an appropriate amount of stress? Because actually a little bit of stress is actually a very good thing for you. But when is it turning from an appropriate and a place that pushes you to your best until it turns like pathologic and it's toxic for you? So one, I think, is having that awareness piece. Number two is always coming back to like that self-assessment. How am I doing? What is going on in my life right now? Am I just a little stressed, or am I getting burned out? And so some people can kind of do these like personal self-assessments by looking at their calendar, or maybe they journal, or there's numerous apps, that sort of thing. Just like coming back and recentering on yourself to say, like, where am I at today? Where am I at this week? Where am I at in this semester? That sort of thing. And then the last one that I would suggest on mitigating away from burnout is just realizing that you are not stuck, and looking purposefully into the actions that you can take to make your life better. Because again, the delayed gratification of like, it's going to get better, it's going to get better, it's going to get better when is you not owning what you can control. And we all have a small locus of control. Like, we can't control the weather and the crazy ass politics of our country and all of that shit. But there are a lot of things that we can control that will dramatically improve our lives. And I think that was part of my own burnout story, is that I was trying to be everything to everybody. Like, I was trying to be like the perfect student, and then I was trying to be like the perfect, I was the president of biology club. And then, oh, by the way, in college, I also played soccer and volleyball on a collegiate scholarship. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was an RA in my dorm. And so you want to talk about like overworking? I got the crown on that one. But again, like, it's coming back and being like, why am I doing all of this? Am I doing it because I want to, or because I like want to pad up my CV and make it look like, quote unquote, I'm a great applicant?
Great, thank you for answering that for us. A lot of people were asking why you chose family medicine, and if you think that, like, from what you have seen, what specialties have like lower, higher rates of burnout, or does that contribute at all?
Okay. Do you want the positive answer why I chose family medicine, or the like kind of dark, twisty answer?
We want the
Real answer.
the honest answer.
I'll give you both then. Okay, the positive answer was because I saw in family medicine that I could have connection with people, and that I could literally do whatever I wanted. If I wanted to deliver babies, bammo, I could do it. If I wanted to train and do colonoscopies, boom, I could do that. If I wanted to work inpatient in a hospital, I could do that. If I wanted to work outpatient, I could do that. If I wanted to do urgent care, if I wanted to work in the emergency room, if I wanted to do global missions, like, I would be trained that I could go to other countries. And so that was like, I would say that was like the sunshiny, outward facing view of why I chose family medicine. The kind of dark, twisty reason I chose family medicine, I love dermatology, but I'll be honest, I didn't think I was good enough to match into a dermatology residency. I mean, just being honest. I also looked at it too. When I graduated med school, I was 5 months pregnant at the time. And so I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to have a baby and go to residency if I am not close to my family, which I know that's a total fallacy because I've seen so many friends do it now, but that was like where I was stuck in my mindset and in my head at that time. And so those were kind of the dark, twisty versions of why family medicine. Is there specialties who are immune to burnout? No, there's not. It's across the board. I talk to all sorts of different types of physicians doing all sorts of different types of things. And you're not immune from it anywhere. So it really is up to you as an individual, like with those 3 steps I was talking about earlier, that you pay attention to that.
Great, thank you. And kind of like on this topic, someone was asking if there's an intersection between psychiatry and osteopathic medicine, the topic of like mental health and being a little bit more holistic in the approaches, if you think there's an interesting intersection between those.
I haven't seen anything like formally studied that has shown like DOs are quote unquote happier, to be honest. Again, I think it's kind of like the specialty question, like DOs aren't immune to burnout, obviously. But that, sorry, I had to close the pop-up question. I'm super ADHD, if you haven't noticed this yet. So I'm self-diagnosing. But I do think that there is a connection, and I have great MD colleagues who are super mind-body aware and holistic in the way that they treat people. And MDs can even go to courses and get certified to do osteopathic treatment on patients. So again, like, I don't think the label is what will keep you quote unquote safe.
Great, thank you so much for answering that. We had a few questions.
I saw your maternity leave question.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that, yeah, definitely a lot of people were interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, hashtag real life there. The question I get a lot is like, when is the right time to start a family and have a baby? And in 2011, when I was pregnant, there wasn't a good time. And in 2021, there's still not a good time. Women out there, people of color, I just want to just forewarn you, medicine is mean. It is mean and it is not just. And we're working on it. And hopefully, as people like myself and other people stand up and say, hey, this is a huge inequity, it will start to be better. I literally got 28 days after I had my son before I was told I have to be back or I will have to repeat my first year residency. And I was like, hell fucking no, am I repeating this hellhole of a year? Like, I will be back. So yeah, it definitely, we don't practice what we preach, which is like good maternal fetal bonding, breastfeeding, that sort of thing. Somebody says 28 days only. Yeah, I had a friend who went back in 3 days. She was a surgery resident. And so luckily I got 28 days. With my second child, I was a third year resident at that point, and I think I got a full 5 weeks with him. I'd have to go back and look at the calendar, but I think I got 30 days with him, which is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like, you are just like trying not to be insane at that point. For anybody who's had kids, you know that like postpartum period is just as rough as the pregnancy as well. And then on top of that, then you're taking care of patients and call and prescribing medicine. Yeah, it's a little bit crazy town. But it was one of those as well that I knew in my heart that I was not going to let my job dictate what I wanted for my life as well. And I've had some male colleagues tell me, well, you made it harder on yourself. Like, you did that. And I would push back to say that the system needs to recognize that women are not going away. Our fertility statuses are not going away. And just because we show up differently in residency and we have other life priorities, it doesn't make us any less valuable to the system. So I am super passionate about advocating for women in medicine, for maternity care, for breastfeeding. And I am hoping and praying that by the time you guys get to that position where I was at, it will be better.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We really appreciate that. There was a lot of people wondering, is it during residency, it might be program specific or kind of like personal, but are you allowed to negotiate like contracts and maternity leave and stuff? Or is it really just like you get what you get and that's it?
No. And so that's why there's so much injustice in the residency system. So once you go to med school, med school makes you a doctor, and residency teaches you and trains you into the type of doctor you're going to be. The governing body over that is called the ACGME. And they are trying to make this more fair, but it really comes down to a hospital and program individual basis. Right now, you get laughed at if you try to negotiate anything. They're like, no, it's like take it or leave it type of things. Now, there are some standards that if they're brought in front of the ACGME, that the program can be penalized if they're not meeting like basic requirements. But there's still a lot that happens kind of in the closets of programs. There's supposed to be duty hours and supposed to be monitoring of that, where you don't go over your, and it depends on the year, the different set amount of times, but there's a lot of times that those rules are being violated. There's wellness initiatives for residents that are not being followed as well. The ACGME hasn't come out with a hard rule about maternity leaves, but we're pushing them in that direction.
Great. Good to hear that there's some being taken. Moving away from the maternity topic, there was a lot of people wondering like how to help others that we see dealing, like what we can do in a position where we're watching someone who we think is struggling.
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that you must do is like acknowledge that you see them, because most of the time with burnout, like we almost treat people like the plague, because we're like, oh, don't look at them, like don't acknowledge them, because then they're gonna like get their burnout cooties on me. So let's just pretend like everything's fine, keep going, positivity. And we don't acknowledge like the struggle and pain. And so one of the stories I always talk about is when I was a first year resident, I was back from maternity leave. They didn't give me a place to pump. So I literally hung up sheets and pumped at my desk in like the open resident room because I was kind of like, fuck you, like I need to do this, but you're not helping me. And I remember after I was pumping one time and I was like sitting at my desk sobbing too because it was like 7 o'clock at night. I hadn't picked my baby up yet. So that's why I had to pump because I couldn't feed him. Still had probably another hour or 2 hours of work to do. And one of my co-residents, his name was Dr. Jones, he came over and he just like put his hand on my shoulder. And I remember him telling me, he's like, I don't know what's going on, but I want you to know that I see you. And that like was like, finally, someone's acknowledging like my pain and all of this, my struggle and all of this. Like I am trying. And his next question was just, how can I help? Just like putting a hand out there and being like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what you need. I'm not going to make any presumptions or suggestions, but like, how can I help? And I think that to me, I didn't have any answers for him at that point, like how he could help. I couldn't even see, but just knowing that someone was available was hugely powerful. And so that's the biggest thing on from where people transition into like just kind of the gray of burnout into like the black scary side of burnout is when they feel like they have no hope, when they feel like they have no support. And then that's when like suicidal thinking starts popping in. I'll be perfectly honest. So right now we know of practicing physicians, females in my age demographic, about 14 to 20% of those doctors are walking around with some sort of suicidal ideation. And that's scary that people think that life would be better if they were dead. So it's just about asking people like, how can I help you? Don't ask them if they're okay, because obviously you know they're not okay. But the next thing you want to ask them is, how can we make you safe? And that's, and you can even ask, you can ask somebody like, hey, are you thinking about hurting or killing yourself? That's not going to like put those thoughts in there. I promise you. If those thoughts are already there, they're going to let a sigh out of relief to be like, yeah, can we talk about it?
Great. Thank you for touching on that topic. It's super hard to talk about, so thank you for being willing to do so. There was a really good question from someone. You kind of mentioned when you were interviewing for schools and residencies, you saw like that the DO schools were happier. And what advice you have for people learning about like the environments before they're accepting these schools and these positions? What kind of characteristics do you look for applying to programs?
I think what you really need to do is get in contact with people who are currently in that school or who is a recent grad or alumni and just ask them, just straight talk and ask them what they thought of it. How did it prepare them? Because, you know, like when you go to orientation days or you go to interview days, you're going to see what they want you to see. And that's usually big fancy buildings with fountains in front of them and balloons, right? So let's go to the source of people who are actually in the program and just say like, hey, let's just talk about it. Not that I want to like see the school's dirty underwear. I just want to know like, what am I really preparing for? And if you hear the words like, well, we work hard, but we play hard, that to me is a red flag. I just, there's something about those words that I don't like. Because I heard them a lot from malignant programs.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good one to look out for. A lot of people were actually saying that they wanted to know the answer to this. But let's say you can identify that, you know, you're on the route to being burned out. How would we go about asking help from our mentors if we're starting to feel like we're going down that route?
I think it's super great that, you know, anybody who's in that place and they're ready to ask for help. What I would say, though, is you need to talk to the people who have earned your trust. And sometimes mentors aren't that. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're great people. So what I would say the first place to reach out for is that safe space. That someone who has earned your trust that you can talk to and say like, hey, I've really got this going on. Because some mentors will, like maybe they're your college advisor or whatever that's going on. They'll just kind of look at you and be like, yeah, I've heard this before. So you really want to identify like who are your people, who are your tribe that can help you. And it may or may not be a older adult. It may be a friend. It may be somebody who's just a couple years ahead of you to get some advice, because that first like coming out and saying like self-identifying and being like, hey, I have a problem is already a super vulnerable and scary place to be. And there's nothing worse, and I had this personal experience, than going to someone and like bearing your soul, and then they're like, that's not that bad, you're okay, keep going. And that's what almost drove me into a deeper spot.
Yeah, it's definitely important to find people that are your safe space. And Juan and I are both psych majors, so we both like are very intense on this. So definitely find your people. Kind of switching gears, there was a question asking if you've dealt with the like wage and gender gap in medicine, and if so, like how to deal with that.
It's another huge fight that we're doing right now, because there are so many believers in the old school system to be like, well, women get paid less in medicine because they just work less. And so the answer is, instead of working part-time, you need to just work full-time. And even though the studies are out there and that shows like for compensating for hours and that sort of thing, like the wage gap is still there, the best thing that you can do is be informed yourself and to understand what is the current levels. And so in medicine, we use a couple different guidelines that tell us like on pay percentages. One of the organizations called MGMA, and you can figure out like for my specialty, for my level of experience, what is the 50th percentile in my region of the country that physicians make on this. And so staying informed on that data is huge, because when you first get out, like people are showing you contracts with like multiple zeros behind them. And I don't know about most of the people who are here. I grew up lower middle class. So my folks like maybe made $75,000 a year. And when somebody handed me a contract where I was going to make over $200,000 a year, I was like, holy fucking shit, I am so rich right now. And I just took the first offer without even negotiating, because I was like, this is amazing. Little did I know that if I had negotiated, they were lowballing me, but I didn't know. So information is power.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that advice. It is really, it looks nice when you have that big number, but know your worth. Always remember your worth. So there was a question asking, if you come to the decision that you need to like switch programs, that you need to leave where you're at, how do you go about switching residencies if you really are unhappy? And is that even a possibility? Like, can you switch from one program to another?
You can switch. It's not impossible. It's super challenging though, to be perfectly honest. There's a whole bunch of logistics, and I don't want to like get into boring you all, but essentially you've got to rematch, or you've got to find a program that you can match into. And so much of that is based on money, to be perfectly honest, and if they have money for you, or if so part of residency programs is federally compensated by the government, so like Medicare and Medicaid dollars. And so, and this is where it gets slimy and sticky in medicine, but programs will not accept transfer residents if they can't also take their Medicare dollars and Medicaid dollars. So what I would advise is there are a lot of experts and a lot of coaches who are helping residents who are in this position so that they can transition well. So I would say you need to get with somebody who understands this and who can help you navigate it. Just as if you had a legal problem, you would hire a lawyer, or if you had a tax issue, you would get an accountant. Like, you need a coach, you need a consultant to help you through this transition, because it can get really ugly really fast. But that shouldn't scare you if this is the right decision for you. because I've had several friends, several residents that I work with now who it was the absolute best decision. Was it hard as hell to make the transition? It was, but when they came out the other side, they realized, holy shit, this is much better.
That's great. Thank you so much for answering that question for us. There were people throughout have been asking if being so open about burnout have you ever received like negative comments about that? Has there ever been any negative aspects of that? And then kind of also like what
Girl, you haven't made it till you got haters.
and
Yes.
then like, the other side of that, people are wondering like what have also been the benefits of being so open as well.
Okay, yes. Okay, to the negative. Abso-fucking-lutely. I remember within the first year that I started talking about my story, and honestly, I just kind of came out and started talking about it because I didn't know what else to do, and I was like, I can't be the only one. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a loudmouth, and like I'm not afraid to show it. And there were a lot of, I'll be perfectly honest, older white men who, after I would share my story at conferences or meetings, would come up to me and be giving me solutions and telling me ways that how I should feel and how I should fix my life and all of this. And they didn't even get it. So what I had to realize is for my coming out, it wasn't for them. It was for the women who were in the back or pumping or in the bathroom or trying to pick up their kid. My story was for them because they could relate to it. And because those are the people I'm going to be able to help. So when I get haters on my Instagram or LinkedIn, or they leave me nasty comments on my podcast reviews, like I told you, like you haven't made it till you had haters. And I also look at it as well as to be like, if this is the worst thing that you can say about me, then, you know, you do you, boo. It's okay. Now, the best that has come out about telling my story is now I'm sitting here with you guys and I'm able to have a really honest and open conversation and hopefully crack open some taboo topics that if you haven't thought about them, now you'll be thinking about them. Or that if you're feeling like this, you can be like, oh, okay. Somebody who has made it through to the other side, she's doing fine. She's sitting in her home office where she does telemedicine with physicians and figured it out. That I can be hope and inspiration for you in the future. Also, the thousands of other physicians that I've talked with or podcasted with or talked with or had conversations so that they too realize like it's not you. You're not broken. And let me tell you about it.
Yeah, there are so many people honestly obsessed with your advice and honestly your honesty. I know I can tell already that everyone's taking it to heart and really listening to you. So thank you so much for that. There are a lot of people that are really interested in just wanting to hear this answer. How can we, as students who haven't gone into medical school yet, advocate for women in medicine more?
That's a great question. So I'm just sitting here today and I'm like, you know what? You guys are the generation of influence. I mean, if you can get behind, find your favorite female physician on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, wherever you hang, TikTok, whatever, wherever you hang out, and like blast her to fellow colleagues. Blast messages that are really touching to you. Because no, we may not be, you're not going to be sitting in the CEO C-suites or in the boardrooms yet. You guys will be there. I guarantee it. But what you can do is do the boots on the ground advocacy now. When you see the news stories come up about another physician suicide, because right now we have about 2 to 3 a day right now, talking about it and naming it and being like, hey, I am going to be one of these future physicians and this is not tolerable. Like, we need to know that it's so bad that doctors are ending their lives because of the job that they're pursuing. So I would say, like, just speak up and be sassy. And if somebody has a problem with it, then you can just remind them, like, this is not just about me. This is about a profession that I care about. And for those women who are ahead of me, I'm going to raise them up because I know there's an Errin Weisman out there and she's going to pull me on her shoulders and raise me up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have a little bit of some tears in my eyes, but we're fine. Everything's good. Love that. I guess the next one that a lot of people wanted to hear is how to address compassion fatigue.
Compassion fatigue, I feel like, is on the spectrum with burnout. I think it's a symptom in there that when you're burned out, like, you just don't give a damn's busted and you just can't like care anymore. Because again, going back to my analogy of like just treading water, like if you've ever been a lifeguard, which I was in the summer times, and you know, like if somebody's like thrashing around and like drowning you, you can't be an effective lifeguard. Like you've got to take care of yourself. And I think that's where compassion fatigue, like if you aren't even taking care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else well. And so I think it all comes back to, again, you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to fill your own cup, and you shouldn't be pouring it out for other people. Your excess should be the overflow that goes to other people.
Thank you so much. That was a question that was asked a lot throughout the session, so thank you for addressing that. So I guess we can maybe do one or more questions, then kind of start wrapping up, one or so questions. A lot of people are wondering how burnout has affected your family life and your relationships with like those that are really close and important to you.
Yeah, so when I was in like what I call the pit of burnout, and then I found the basement, it was rough. It was super rough. I'm surprised that my husband did not divorce me. I married up. He is definitely my better half. But it was super impactful on those relationships. Just statistics say that for a person in burnout, you are 4 to 5 times more likely to be divorced, to develop a drug and alcohol problem, to isolate. And so absolutely. And then on the medical side, we know that burned out physicians have lower patient outcomes, they have increased medical errors and mistakes, and they have decreased interpersonal connections with their nurses and their other colleagues and with their patients as well. And so, like, is this kind of a big problem? Hashtag, it's kind of a big deal.
Thank you for addressing that. A lot of people had asked that question throughout the session, so we're glad to have your answer on that. You've given us a lot of really good advice throughout this whole session, but as we start wrapping up, if there was like one last piece of advice that you could leave pre-med students, we're post-bac, we're in the application cycle, and we're doing it all in this lovely little time of COVID. So if you could give us that one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say to continue to make your own path. It may not look like how you dreamed it when you were in high school or when you first set out and made all your classes and like when you started on this journey, but just remember that it doesn't have to look like the traditional thing. Make your own path. And it doesn't mean you're wrong, and it doesn't mean you're crazy, but what it does mean is you are going to live in the middle of your being, and you are going to take care of the people who need you the most. And at the end of it, you're not going to have the regrets of like, oh my God, should I have done this? Because again, you're trying to be the square peg fitting in the round hole. You're going to remember that you are a square peg, and so you're going to look for square peg opportunities.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We love that. We went ahead and put Dr. Weisman's Instagram and her podcast in the chat. So you guys definitely go check that out. If you loved this, you'll love all the other advice she gives us. Thank you so much for being here with us and offering us your advice today.
Well, I'm just so glad that you guys reached out. I feel like we could keep talking. So maybe in a couple months, like have me come back. We'll do some more Q&A. If you want some more Errin Weisman sass, definitely head over to Instagram. I love hanging out there. I love to see all of you guys. It really is me in the DMs, so like pop on in there. And then if you need some Errin Weisman sass in your ears, then head over to Dr. Me First. Yeah, it's geared towards physicians, but hey, just remember, like, you're baby doctors, you're coming, you're growing up, and you need to know this information that I'm putting out there right now.
Yes, thank you so much. We would love to have you back, and people are saying like, yes, please come back. So everyone's down for that. We would love that.
So definitely when we start the next semester, I'm sure we're going to need to hear all of this all over again. So we'll definitely have you back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been awesome. I saw that we got up to like 120, 130 people. You know, and it really, if anything, like I said, walking away from day, just to remember, like, you're not alone. It's so huge that we can feel so isolated in our world today. So no, you are not alone.
Yes, that's
Thank
really
you. Great to hear that.
Thank you. We hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll definitely stay in touch and we will talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.